in a week of much intense political wrangling in the UK, I thought I would share some thoughts about Judaism and politics. In chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, Shemaiah says, "Love work, despise positions of power, and do not become overly familiar with the government." That's an interesting statement, because he's not saying that you shouldn't be political at all. He's just saying you shouldn't become absorbed in politics, because if you become absorbed in politics, perhaps there is a risk of corruption, there is a risk of behaving unethically, or there is a risk of abandoning Judaism. In chapter 3 of Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana says, "Whoever takes upon themselves the yoke of Torah, the yoke of government and worldly responsibilities is removed from them. But whoever removes the yoke of Torah from themselves, the yoke of government and the yoke of responsibility is placed upon them." So Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana has a different perspective. For him, it's an either-or situation. Either you're religious or you're political. Whereas Shemaiah said it's possible to be religious and political so long as you don't get absorbed in that world of politics. This is actually a very interesting early reflection on Judaism and politics. In fact, even going back to the Bible, there has been some skepticism of secular authority. For example, in the first book of Samuel, in chapter 8, when the people are clamoring for a king, Samuel, the prophet Samuel, is extremely upset. And God says to Samuel, "Don't be upset. They've always been like this, actually. And go back and tell the people, okay, look, we'll give you a king, but you need to be aware that if you do, he will amass wealth. He will tax you. He will take from you." And the people still say, nonetheless, we still want a king. So in early Judaism, we particularly see skepticism of secular government and politics. How do we respond to that today? Well, there are some people today, especially in this country, who are trying to fuse religion and politics in order to break down the separation of church and state. That's not a Jewish response at all. In fact, even though in the Bible, of course, we have very strongly the priest, the prophet, and the king, you have a triumvirate of leadership. And even though there you had, in some sense, a religious politic, even there the Bible was skeptical. Today, in this country, especially in a country with multiple religions, bringing religion into politics can be extremely problematic. And so we actually cherish this separation of church and state. So what do we do with this? What do we do with the idea that particularly Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana provides us with a choice, either Torah or politics, where Shemaiah says, okay, some politics if you need, but don't become overly absorbed in it, because otherwise you might lose yourself. You might start behaving inappropriately. You might end up losing your Judaism, your Jewish practice. I think for me, the strength of Reform Judaism has always been in balancing tradition and modernity. The idea of a choice between religion and politics actually seems nonsensical to me. And the reason for that is because so much of Judaism is deeply political. If politics is taking care of our society, then the biblical laws on distribution of wealth, on ensuring justice, on welcoming the stranger into our camp, on protecting the environment around us, all of these laws and many more are clearly political. They're not party political, but they are political. I would in fact say that contrary to Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, it's not that we have a choice of either Judaism or politics, but that our Judaism must be political. That's quite a statement. Our Judaism must be political doesn't mean, though, that we get swallowed up in the political system. doesn't mean that we become absorbed in it, but it does mean that we can't shut ourselves off, live in a yeshiva in Jerusalem and ignore the world around us, not watching the news, not caring, because ultimately the only reality is the reality of the Jewish people and their relationship with God and Torah. That's not actually a real world. So perhaps what we can say is maybe we can take some comfort from Rabbi Hanina, the deputy high priest, who also in Pirkei Avot in chapter 3 said, "Pray for the welfare of the government, for if people didn't have it, the people would swallow each other alive." So at the very least, what we can say, following Rabbi Hanina, the deputy high priest, is at least we can pray for a healthy moral government. We can have that connection between our Judaism and politics. Or we could go further. We could go further to Shemaiah and say that we love work, that we despise positions of power rising up to become the ultimate leader of any kind of political structure, so that we don't become overly familiar with the government. His concern, of course, was the Roman government and the possibility of having to make a difficult choice between the Jewish people and the Roman government. In this country, the government is not like the Roman government, not even in the UK. It's not oppressive in that sense to the Jewish people. But there is much that still needs to be improved in this world. In some sense, political structures still do oppress people. There isn't justice in our land. So therefore, we need to find a balance. And the struggle of Reform Judaism, that blessed struggle, is a struggle of finding our place, a religious place, in a clearly political society. I think that we can be blessed. I think that we can celebrate our Judaism through politics to try to bring about change. Because if we sit back and do nothing in the face of oppression, in the face of systemic injustice, then we are contributing to that injustice. Therefore, tzedek, tzedek tishpot. Justice, justice you shall pursue. We are obliged in this society to pursue justice, but that doesn't mean that we need to get caught up, totally subsumed in the political world. And so it is for us, as individuals and as a community, to find a healthy balance between religion, between Judaism and politics.